The war of words continues tonight between U.S. Senator Richard Burr and his Democratic challenger Deborah Ross. At issue is a series of ads run by Burr and other Republicans claiming Ross opposed the creation of the state's sex offender registry. Ross has cut ads of her own accusing Burr of lying. Investigative reporter Nick Oxner is digging for the truth in today's Friday Fact Check.
I was sexually assaulted. I woke up.
The attack started nearly a month ago.
Deborah Ross opposed
the North Carolina Sex Offender Registry. She wants to protect sexual predators over victims.
Claims from Republican Senator Richard Burr that his Democratic rival, Deborah Ross, opposed the creation of North Carolina's Sex Offender Registry.
ACLU lawyer Deborah Ross opposed North Carolina's Sex Offender Registry, warning of the repercussions to sex offenders and worrying about their right to privacy.
The charges have prompted more than just a denial from Ross. Instead, she's deployed any number of surrogates to push back on the charges. She even cut a TV ad accusing Burr of lying.
Senator Burr is flat out lying, and that's why people hate politics.
So, who's telling the truth? In today's Friday Fact Check, we rate Burr's claims as true. Burr's campaign has cited a number of news articles dating back nearly 2 decades to support their claim. But we found 2 documents that helped us make our decision. First, this memo from 1995 that Ross wrote as head of the North Carolina ACLU, in which she says a law passed that year establishing the first sex offender registry would make it even harder for people to reintegrate into society. Another bill was passed 2 years later, putting the registry online, which prompted more skepticism from Ross, still the head of the ACLU, in an article published in the Raleigh News and Observer. Fountain Odom, the man calling Burr a liar in this ad for Ross, authored both bills. But Ross's ad only talks about her support for the 1997 legislation, leaving her opposition to the 1995 bill that created the registry unchallenged. Ross's campaign refused our multiple requests for an interview, but she was still forced to explain herself on camera at Thursday night's Senate debate.
You were opposed to this bill when it passed.
When this bill was being considered, like a good lobbyist, lawyer, legislator, you have to look at the implications of a bill. Ultimately, the bill is working, the law is working. Like I said, I voted 18 times to strengthen and update it, and raising issues isn't the same thing as opposing a bill.
One of the 18 votes to strengthen the sex offender registry Ross highlights is a 2008 bill called the Jessica Lunsford Act, which required stricter penalties for sex offenders. Legislative records show Ross voted to allow a compromise version of the bill to become law, but was one of only 4 House members to abstain from the vote that passed the legislation out of the House. Our review of the other votes cited by the Ross campaign found 2 other bills that didn't make any changes to the sex offender registry. So, we rate the claims Ross has made defending herself as false. Nick Oxner, WBTV, on your side.
It's Friday with a little more than 2 weeks left until Election Day. That means it is time to fact-check more claims made by politicians in an effort to smear their opponent. Today we're checking claims made by Roy Cooper in his race against Pat McCrory about education spending. Investigative reporter Nick Oxner has checked those claims and he's crunched the numbers for this Friday Fact Check.
At first, I was so happy to teach in North Carolina.
Democrat Roy Cooper's hit his opponent, Republican Governor Pat McCrory, over and over this election about his record on education.
We've fallen to 41st in teacher pay,
Whether it's teacher pay,
44th in per student spending,
or the money being spent on students, Cooper says North Carolina could do better and will be if he's elected governor. So, we wanted to know, does Cooper's math add up? We rate his claims on teacher pay and per student spending as true. But we crunched the numbers, we realized there's more to the story than just the state's rankings. Data provided by the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction shows per student spending has actually gone up each year since McCrory's been in office. So too has teacher pay.
like over 2,000 other teachers. I'm having to move to another state.
Cooper's also said teachers are fleeing the Tar Heel state for better paying jobs elsewhere. But figures provided by DPI show the total number of public and charter teachers in North Carolina has actually gone up in the 3 years between fiscal year 2014 and 2016. So, we rate that claim as false. Nick Oxner, WBTV, on your side.
Molly, depending on whose commercials you believe, Attorney General Roy Cooper has either turned around the state crime lab or run it into the ground. So tonight we're taking a look at one claim made by Republican Governor Pat McCrory about his Democratic opponent's record on the state crime lab. Who's telling the truth? Investigative reporter Nick Oxner digs through the details in tonight's Friday Fact Check.
State Crime Lab.
The performance of the North Carolina Crime Lab has become a marquee issue in this year's race for North Carolina governor, with incumbent Republican Pat McCrory and groups that support him criticizing the lab under Democrat Attorney General Roy Cooper's supervision. And Cooper claiming he's fixed problems at the long-beleaguered agency. Tonight, we're looking at this ad from McCrory's campaign.
They can still take as long as 2 years to process rape kits.
A spokeswoman for Cooper's office has told multiple media outlets across the state the average turnaround time for a sample sent to the crime lab is about 7 months. But when we talked with the state crime lab director, John Byrd, in September of 2015, he said some tests can still take a long time to process.
We have cases that are over 2 years old.
At the time, Byrd attributed much of the backlog to a requirement for crime lab analysts to appear in court in person to testify in the cases they're involved with, which is why he says Cooper asked for more funding to hire additional staff last year, which the legislature approved. A new lab facility is also under construction in Henderson County that will open in 2017 and is expected to cut down turnaround time for police agencies in the western part of the state.
We didn't get in this shape overnight. Started in 2009. It's going to take us a while to get out of the hole that we've been in, but we're making great progress on that.
So we rate the claim made in McCrory's ad as true. Nick Oxner, WBTV, on your side.
Candidates are making a lot of claims these days, both about themselves and their opponents. It can be tough to steer through all the mudslinging to try to separate fact from fiction, which is why we'll be fact-checking certain claims every Friday between now and Election Day. Tonight, investigative reporter Nick Oxner is digging into claims made by Democratic candidate for U.S. Senate Deborah Ross that her opponent, Republican Richard Burr, is part of the establishment in Washington.
Deborah Ross's campaign started its attack on Senator Richard Burr's 2 decades in Washington by using the senator himself.
Deborah, listen, you gotta stop saying Washington's not working.
Just tell them the truth. You took millions from special interests, voted to cut your own taxes and raise taxes on working folks.
Well, an actor portraying Burr, anyways. The point the campaign was trying to make is Richard Burr's been in Washington too long and, over that time, has taken millions in campaign contributions from PACs tied to specific industries.
Burr's gone to Washington and forgotten about North Carolina. Washington may be working for Senator Burr, but it's not working for the rest of us.
On its face, we rate those claims as true. Data compiled by the campaign finance tracking website OpenSecrets.org shows Burr's taken more than $3 million from special interest groups just in the time since his last election. And in a recent interview, Burr acknowledged his long tenure in Washington.
I had no intentions of staying as long as I have, but the switch from the House to the Senate, my chairmanship of the Senate Intelligence Committee, I've found that there is real value to the historical perspective of 9/11.
Burr says his long time on Capitol Hill is actually a good thing, and points out he's already decided this will be his last term if he wins re-election.
That institutional knowledge is incredibly valuable to the American people.
Nick Oxner, WBTV, on your side.
We'll be doing a Friday fact check each week between now and the election. Next week, we'll be checking claims by Burr that Deborah Ross opposed the creation of the sex offender registry.